Disclosure Day may only work within the context of Steven Spielberg's entire filmography. That's not to say it doesn't work on its own, even if you are unfamiliar with most of his work. There's still plenty to admire here, but it's a film that feels like the natural culmination of themes he has been wrestling with throughout his entire career. And its ending becomes especially powerful when viewed through what we now understand about him as a filmmaker. That being said, there are spoilers ahead, so if you haven't seen the film, bookmark this and come back later. But as this is his first film post Fabelmans, it inevitably raises the question of how much that deeply personal work should inform our reading of what is to come next. So many people have already noted how the Fabelmans recontextualized much of his filmography, giving us a clearer understanding of who he is as a filmmaker. What surprised me, however, was just how directly it seems to inform Disclosure Day. One of the recurring ideas throughout Spielberg's filmography is the loss of innocence, particularly through the eyes of a child. And now when I say loss of innocence, I don't necessarily mean trauma. More often, it's a pivotal moment, a realization that fundamentally changes how someone sees the world. E.T. is perhaps the cleanest example. The arrival of an extraterrestrial forces its young characters to confront something larger than themselves, leaving them both frightened by the vastness of the universe and confronted by a newfound sense of connection. Similar moments can be found throughout Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Empire of the Sun, Hook, AI, The Adventures of Tintin, the BFG. In many ways, it's one of the most defining motifs of Spielberg's career. With the added context of the Fabelmans and the profound impact his parents' separation had on him, I wasn't surprised to learn that Disclosure Day eventually circles back to its two protagonists as children, revealing the formative moments that shaped who they would become. That's a large part why I find this to be such a meaningful addition to his body of work, because in many ways, his stories involving aliens or realities beyond human understanding, the revelation is limited to a relatively small group of people. Disclosure Day expands that idea dramatically. The entire premise revolves around a world-changing moment, one that strips away humanity's collective innocence by sharing a truth that can no longer remain hidden. And the way that Spielberg approaches that idea is also deliberate. Margaret and Daniel are each given gifts that allow them to help communicate the alien's message. Margaret possesses this extraordinary capacity for empathy, allowing her to understand people, and Daniel possesses a gift for mathematics, allowing him to understand the aliens. If that pairing sounds familiar, it's because it echoes the portrait of Spielberg's parents presented in The Fabelmans. His father was drawn to technology and the emerging world of computers, while his mother was guided by emotion, creativity, and the arts. While their separation suggests these two ways of seeing the world were ultimately incompatible within their marriage, Spielberg seems to have spent his career embracing both. He understands that he carries a part of each of them, and in many ways the duality help explain why he has become such an influential filmmaker. He's a master technician, someone who instinctively understands camera placement, blocking, pacing, and visual storytelling, but he's equally gifted in connecting with audiences on an emotional level, and when those two strengths work together, that is really something special. Films like Jaws and Jurassic Park aren't merely technical achievements. They endure because their craftsmanship serves something deeper. Beneath the spectacle are stories that tap into universal fears, anxieties, and moral questions, forcing us to examine our relationship with power, responsibility, and the consequence of human ambition. Disclosure Day ultimately argues that neither side is strong enough on its own. The film offers an optimistic view of humanity, suggesting that meaningful progress requires both scientific understanding and human empathy. If we can bring those two things together, people might actually listen. And I also don't think it's a coincidence that the movie ends with that word, listen, because the point of Disclosure Day isn't the message the aliens are trying to communicate. The point is preparing humanity to receive it. Listening is the foundation of understanding. It's the prerequisite for growth, empathy, and meaningful communication. Throughout his entire career, Spielberg has asked the audience to listen, not just to his stories, but the ideas that are behind them. At the same time, he understood that communication carries its own responsibility. If you want people to hear you, you have to find a way to reach them. In that sense, Disclosure Day feels like the work of a filmmaker looking back on everything he spent decades trying to say and asking one final question: if we are willing to listen.